On a cold December evening in 2019, Emily Carter left St. Mary's Hospital after her late-night shift. The 26-year-old nurse had been working a grueling 12-hour schedule, and she was exhausted. It was just past midnight when she texted her best friend, Rachel, almost home. See you tomorrow. She was looking forward to her day off, a chance to sleep in, have breakfast with Rachel, and finally finish reading the novel that had been sitting on her nightstand for weeks. Emily had no idea those would be the last words she would ever send. The next morning, Rachel waited at their favorite coffee shop, but Emily never showed up. At first, she assumed Emily had overslept. She called her, but the phone went straight to voicemail. After an hour of unanswered messages, a sick feeling crept into Rachel's stomach. Emily was always punctual. She decided to drive to Emily's apartment, hoping to find her there. When she arrived, Emily's car wasn't in its usual parking spot. Rachel drove around the block and found it 2 streets away. The engine was still running, the doors were locked, and Emily's purse was on the passenger seat. It looked as if she had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Rachel immediately called the police. Within minutes, officers were on the scene, searching the car for clues. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and no blood. Nothing suggested a struggle. It was as if Emily had vanished into thin air. Detectives pulled security footage from a nearby gas station where Emily had stopped just minutes before her disappearance. The grainy footage showed her pulling into the station, filling up her car, and paying inside. A dark SUV pulled up behind her. A hooded man stepped out, but his face was obscured by the poor quality of the footage. Moments later, Emily drove off toward her apartment. The SUV followed. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Detectives questioned Emily's friends, family, and co-workers, trying to piece together her final moments. Her parents, who lived in Michigan, drove to Chicago that same day, devastated and desperate for answers. Emily had no history of reckless behavior. She wasn't involved in drugs or a secret relationship. She was a hard-working nurse, beloved by her patients and colleagues. As investigators combed through Emily's phone records, they discovered something disturbing. For the past month, she had been receiving anonymous text messages. At first, they were vague, "I see you." Then, they became more aggressive, "You can't hide from me." Emily had mentioned them to Rachel but dismissed them as a prank. Now, those messages seemed to be a warning. The first suspect was Emily's ex-boyfriend, Mark Reynolds. Their relationship had ended 6 months earlier, and according to Rachel, Emily had described him as possessive and unpredictable. When police questioned him, Mark appeared nervous, but he had an alibi. He had been out drinking with friends that night. Security footage from the bar confirmed he had been there for hours. With Mark ruled out, detectives turned to Emily's workplace. A nurse at St. Mary's Hospital mentioned a patient who had made Emily uncomfortable. His name was Daniel Brooks, a 42-year-old man who had been discharged a month earlier after being treated for a minor injury. According to Emily's co-workers, Daniel had been overly friendly with her, often lingering after his appointments. She had mentioned feeling uneasy but hadn't thought much of it. Detectives went to Daniel's apartment, but it was empty. Inside, they found something chilling, a Polaroid picture of Emily taped to the bedroom wall. It had been taken from outside her apartment window. With Daniel now the prime suspect, police launched a citywide manhunt. His phone was turned off, and he had no known relatives in the area. His landlord claimed he had moved out suddenly, just days before Emily's disappearance. The media picked up the story, and soon, Emily's case became national news. Her parents pleaded for information, offering a $50,000 reward for any leads. Volunteers organized search parties, scouring parks, abandoned buildings, and wooded areas outside the city. Weeks passed with no sign of Emily. Then, on January 15th, 3 hikers exploring a remote trail in Indiana stumbled upon something horrifying. A shallow grave, hastily covered with leaves and dirt. Inside, they found a body. It was Emily. Emily's body was taken to the medical examiner's office. The autopsy confirmed she had been strangled. There were bruises on her wrists and ankles, suggesting she had been tied up. The time of death was estimated to be within 48 hours of her disappearance, meaning she had likely been held captive before she was killed. Detectives examined the area where her body had been found and discovered tire tracks near the grave. They matched the SUV from the gas station footage. Then, a breakthrough. The SUV was traced back to Daniel Brooks' brother, Tom Brooks. Under questioning, Tom cracked. He admitted that Daniel had shown up at his house a few days after Emily's disappearance, acting strangely. Daniel had borrowed his car and disappeared again. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Tom confessed. Daniel had become obsessed with Emily after she treated him at the hospital. He had followed her, watched her apartment, and sent her anonymous messages. The night of her disappearance, he had waited near her home. When she arrived, he blocked her path with his SUV, pretending to need help. When she rolled down her window, he forced his way into the car. Daniel drove Emily to an abandoned cabin in rural Indiana, where he kept her tied up for 2 days. He believed they were meant to be together. When she tried to escape, he panicked and strangled her. Then, he buried her in the woods and fled. With Tom's confession, police tracked Daniel to a rundown motel in Indianapolis. He was arrested without resistance. In court, he refused to speak. His only words were, "She shouldn't have fought me." The trial was swift. The jury took only 2 hours to find him guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Emily's family wept in the courtroom as justice was served. But no sentence could bring back their daughter. Emily's case became a nationwide example of the dangers of stalking and the importance of taking threats seriously. Her parents founded the Emily Carter Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of harassment and advocating for stronger anti-stalking laws. Even today, people remember Emily not just as a victim, but as a symbol of the fight for justice.